So you have a bunch of cilantro and you don't know what to do with it. Can you preserve it? You sure can. I'm going to tell you 3 ways today how to preserve cilantro for long-term storage, not just to have in your refrigerator for a couple of days. But first, tell me, soap or does it taste good? Did you know that's actually a genetic quality? So you can thank your parents if you love it, and you can thank your parents if you hate it. Hi folks, it's Darcy from the Purposeful Pantry, and I am a cilantro lover. The problem for us is that we live in a hot climate that this will bolt within just a little bit of heat and it's gone. So what I have to do is that I have to preserve it for the year so that I have enough to last me all year long. Because in fact, you can preserve cilantro. You can freeze it, you can dehydrate it, you can freeze dry it. There are other ways too that you can do it by like making sauces that you can put in the freezer for long term. We're just gonna work on just preserving it as it is. So let's get started. Now, when we're talking about hanging herbs, I don't recommend taking them right from the grocery store and the bundles that they come in like this and then just hanging these. The problem is that at the store, they spray water on them to keep them fresher. So you've got a lot of water that may be stacked up inside here, inside the stems. So what I do recommend is go ahead and unbundling them, washing them off. You can lay them out to air dry for half an hour or so. They will dry, and then I would split those bundles into smaller bundles to let more air movement happen, and then just go ahead, you can take whatever bundling medium. I'm just going to go ahead and use this because it's handy. Load them back up like this, and then you can hang them like this to dry. Now, of course, another way you can do this is dunk your herb bundles into a lot of water. Swish them around a lot. You've probably got it pretty clean. And then it makes it a little bit easier when you might want to come through it if you have clean branches or clean stems. You can just chop your stems off right there. Move these to compost or however you want to do them. Put them in the freezer for storage. And then you've got a bundle that's ready to go. And here is why you wash all of your produce from the store. So now we're going to try freeze drying cilantro. Let's see how that works. And then we're going to do a little taste test to get the definitive. Is cilantro better dehydrated or freeze dried? Okay, the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and get our freeze dryer trays loaded up because it may take the longest out of any of these methods. What I'm doing is I'm simply just stripping off the leaves as I go. We're saving these stems. We're going to freeze quite a few of them to give to the rabbit. We'll let them thaw out and give them to her. She likes them, so we're going to try that method to freeze them. And then the rest will probably either go into a stock bundle to add to stock. The rest will just go into compost because that compost is going to feed the rest of the plants that feed us. I'm going to pack the tray, and I think my trays are holding, because we're doing these commercially, I'm not doing them homegrown, they are holding probably about 2 to 2.5 bundles. Now, bundles are different size depending on your store and how they're sourcing them and how they're packed. And you want to pack your trays so that it doesn't mound up over the rim of the tray, because there's only so much room, just kind of like a dehydrator. There's not a ton of room for you to have big mounds, but you don't have to lay them out in a single file. Here we go. I have given my freeze dryer about 15 minutes to cool off, and it starts to freeze the chamber. We're going to slide our trays in. Close it up. Close the valve. Start it up. How do you dehydrate cilantro? And don't let anybody tell you that you can't. You can. Okay, now we're talking about dehydrating. And do not let anyone tell you that you cannot dehydrate cilantro. Does it taste like fresh? No, it doesn't. It does lose some of its flavor. And if you dry it high, it's going to lose a lot of its flavor, which is why I recommend drying it just at 95, like you do all herbs, so that you can make sure that you keep as much flavor as you can. And when you're cooking with it, you just have to use a little more than you would if you were using just dried that you got commercially for recipes that require cilantro. And maybe you're going to use it, you have a maybe cilantro lime rice that you're going to make and you don't have any fresh, you can take dried and use it and put it in with your rice while it cooks, but you just may need to use a little more to get that better cilantro flavor. Okay, so what I have done is I have gone ahead, typically when I do herbs, if I have soft herbs and soft stems, I put them in whole in the dehydrator and de-stem afterwards. But that's assuming I have a lot of space. Today, I've still got this entire bowl to do. It's a lot of cilantro. I'm not going to have room to put them on stems into the machine to dry and still get it done in a reasonable amount of time. So I've gone ahead and de-stemmed a lot of the leaves and I'm piling them on my tray. Now you have to watch this when you have some dehydrators because they don't have much clearance between the trays, and when you try to put something that's mounded up, it's just going to shove that stuff either out forward or back into the back of your machine. But I have a trick for you. When you're doing this, if you have a machine like that and you don't want to have to take out every other shelf, what you can do is load your tray up and then put another piece of mesh on top, just like this. And what happens is you can crush this down, press it down some, and it will fit. And this helps protect, lets you move things in and out, and makes it work a lot better. So let's get our dehydrator loaded. All right, here's our cilantro. I didn't really need to use the extra mesh on here, but I went ahead and just left it on so that you can see how it works. We are going to start our machine. So we're gonna do herbs at 95F, 35C for probably about 10 hours. Okay. Now for the next way, you can freeze whole cilantro leaves. You can chop these up a little bit more if you want. Just break them up, chop them up. You can actually even put these in a blender and mix them up with oil or water and just make a sauce out of it. Pour the sauce into your trays and do this same kind of thing. This is probably the freshest way that you can easily do your cilantro to preserve. All I do is I just tuck these down, kind of pack them in. Okay, then the next thing that you can do, and you can do this in any size ice cube tray that you have, there's no set measure. You're going to use what you need when you thaw it out. So then I'm just going to go through here and add the oil. Now when I add oil, I don't get it completely packed in with oil just because I don't think it's necessary to do that much. Just do it like you like. So then all I do is I go through here, put my lid on, and these things are so useful for so many ways that I do all of our preserving. Just set this aside real quick. And then what I always have left after they've been frozen, this is my last batch I did. Then I have this little block that I can pull out. 1, 2, 3, however many I need, throw it into the dish that I'm making, and they will thaw while it's cooking. So then when I'm done, it needs to be cleaned up because my hands got it. I just put it into a reusable freezer bag for me, and then it sits on the freezer door, and I can just come in here and grab cilantro anytime I need to use it in a dish. Here are the results of our freeze-dried. They are good, crispy, ready to go. They still have a good dark flavor. Sorry, I'm trying to get that camera right. And they taste like cilantro. All right, after about 10 hours, these were completely done, but they've had 24. I just let them go as the freeze-dried was still going. So this is what we're looking for. Crunching, and it breaks apart easily. Let's get this stored. All right, so here we have our finished cilantro. And it's gonna make a bit of a mess, so be prepared for that. I'm gonna take this and just pour it into my jar. So this is something that you can use to put into a dish, and you'll want to add more than what a recipe might call for if you're using fresh. But if you're using dried, there's quite a few recipes that I use that have dried cilantro in them. But you won't want to use this fresh, and I may need to get a bigger jar. What is conditioning, and why do I have to do it? Okay, typically, I will tell you to condition your food all the time. always condition, because you want to make sure that things aren't still moist. You want to make sure that the humidity within your jar is equalized, and then you're going to shake the jar around once a day for 5 to 7 days to make sure it's not a problem. However, when it comes to herbs, when I dry them for a day when they don't need it, and I dry them for many more hours, I will skip the conditioning phase because I know these are good and dry. They've had double the time they needed to dry. I tested as I'm touching them and feeling them and seeing how they react. I don't condition at this point just because I've experienced what this is supposed to be like. Let's get on to the freeze-dried, shall we? So I just want to show you the difference between the two, dehydrated versus freeze-dried. Now, dehydrated has a faint cilantro flavor like we've talked about. It does lose some of its flavor with drying. However, the freeze-dried cilantro tastes pretty close to fresh. It's not exactly fresh, but it tastes pretty close. I'm pretty amazed, and it crumbles just as easily. So we need to get this put away immediately. What I'm going to do, however, is make it a little easier on myself. These did not shrink. They are the same size as they were going in. So all I'm going to do is just break it down just a little bit more. Do I have to vacuum seal? Do I have to use an O2 absorber? How do I keep this safe on the shelf? Now, unlike dehydrating, we don't need to condition freeze-dried foods because once you know they're dry, you get them sealed up as soon as possible because freeze-dried foods tend to reabsorb moisture at a quicker rate than dehydrated food. It's just the nature of how they're done. But what I am going to do is vacuum seal both of these. Okay, I'm going to use my vacuum sealer here. I'm going to take off the regular mouth lid and I'm going to put the right on to the jar. I'm going to go ahead and start it. Now, typically you take from anywhere from 30 seconds to 90 seconds, depending on your jar, how much air it's having to remove. What I tend to do also is listen for the pitch. Right now you hear a pitch. Over the course of time, as it draws out the air, that pitch will start increasing. And once it gets up to a higher pitch and stays at that pitch for a little while, then you know it's finished with its vacuum. And because there's a lot of air gap within these, it's going to take a little while to get all of the air out. I'm going to go do our freeze dried. I did about 1 minute and 15 seconds for that. Make sure it's seated properly. And the reason I vacuum seal is I hate O2 absorbers, and I don't store in Mylar bags because that means it's out of sight, out of mind. I won't use it. It doesn't work with my brain and how I organize. So I like to use the jars. While that one is going, I'll make sure to go ahead and mark my jar lid. Now likely, I'm going to go ahead and use up my dehydrated first, and then I'll get to my freeze dry, but I want to make sure that I go ahead and mark the jars to know which is which, because it will also affect how I use it. If I'm going to be cooking something, a dish that I'll put this in, I'm going to crumble this over tacos because it doesn't need to be rehydrated in any fashion inside of a meal. It tastes like cilantro. It'll just be a little crunchy. So, but for true long-term storage, if you're looking at keeping this for however long herbs last in a freeze jar, I actually don't know. I haven't checked into that. I'll put that right here. But if you want true long-term storage and you're not going to touch this for years, use an O2 absorber in a Mylar bag stored in a cool, dark, dry place, and that'll be the best storage for this. But it just doesn't work for me. I prefer this version. And all right. We've got the same thing. It is sealed on there tight. We're going to mark our jar so we know what it is. Freeze dried. 823. All right, here's some honesty. What tastes better, dehydrated cilantro or freeze dried? Freeze dried all the way. Now last week you saw the video where I did tomatoes, and I told you I prefer dehydrated tomatoes over freeze dried because I think they taste better and they have a better texture. That's something that I prefer. But for this, the hands down winner is going to be freeze dried. It keeps almost all of its flavor. It keeps the color and it looks just like fresh because it doesn't shrink up like this does. However, dehydrating is a viable option if that's all you have, and that's fine. That's what I've done for years, and I use dried cilantro. So whichever way works for you, dry it. And if you want to know some of the other essentials that I keep on my dehydrator pantry, watch this video right here. And until I see you again next time, keep preserving.